Hey, what is going on, people of the internet? Welcome back to another episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad, a celebration of all things cinema uploaded directly to the place that hates it the most. I'm Cory, that's Shane, and today I have one more Star Wars video in me before I'm freed, before my sentence is complete. We're ranking the Star Wars live action television shows by season, not by show, because you'll see there's a pretty wide spectrum there. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like this video preemptively, go for it. Why not? And let's dive right in. Shane, it's hard to believe that there's been 8 seasons of Star Wars television already. It feels like it was just yesterday that The Mandalorian was coming out, and we were like, what is Star Wars TV going to look like?
Yeah, it turns out there's a pretty wide range of what TV is going to look like in the Star Wars universe. And we've got more coming too. I mean, we've got Skeleton Crew coming up, Andor season 2. Are those the only 2 that are announced that are still coming?
They officially announced that development is happening on Ahsoka season 2.
Oh,
but it hasn't been officially announced.
That makes sense. Yep.
But aside from those 3, that's really it. Nobody knows what the future is going to bring. Maybe we'll find out more at D23. Is there a D23 this year? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's next month.
Cool. So let's dive right in. We're going to go from 8 down to 1. Shane, what is your least favorite season of Disney Star Wars television?
I've got The Mandalorian season 3.
Me too.
The bottom.
Yeah.
This was kind of a mess.
Kind of.
It's really interesting because the first episode sets up a lot of like decent stuff, and I was like, okay, maybe they've got some ideas for where this is headed, and then they didn't. I don't know exactly what happened with this season. I don't know if it was rushed. I don't know if Filoni working on Ahsoka took away some of the competence and it was just Favreau writing it and it just fell apart. But man, I remembered specifically in one of the episodes where these TIE fighters come and blow up Bo-Katan's castle, and she watches it happen and then looks at the camera and says, "They blew up my home." I was like, oh no, this is not gonna go well, is it? And it didn't go well.
No.
The whole show was kind of a mess. I think the worst episode was probably that episode where all of the Mandalorians are on that like planet with all the monsters that come to eat them, and then like the monster kidnaps the kid, and you find out like much later that like the kid is the son of one of the Mandalorians.
The one that's played by Jon Favreau.
It is, right? Is he the big bulky dude? Yeah. And like there's no connection there whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then like he dies in the end of the show and his son is unimpacted by it at all. It's a bunch of stuff happening and none of it makes sense. None of it's earned. There's no emotional payoff. It's bad.
Yeah. They do my favorite thing where they take 7 episodes to establish who the villain is of the season.
Yeah.
And then it just turns out that it's Moff Gideon again.
Yeah.
And then he dies
5
again
seconds later
or whatever. Yeah. Like it's just so silly. And then they also they started in the first season of Mando, the whole cloning thing. And then in the second season, there's the one episode where you see the Snokes in a jar, and it's like, okay, we're moving towards the cloning thing. And then in this one, all of those jars just get exploded. All the Moff Gideon clones are dead. He's dead. They're just like, we don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah,
bye. That's it.
I do not understand it. It's a big mess. And I think what's weird about it is when the show, like all the speculation was coming out from the fans about what this season would be about, right? And going into it, people are like, oh, maybe the armorer is the bad guy. And like the whole show is going to be about Mando figuring out that like this is kind of a big cult and you don't really need to be a part of it.
Cults are bad.
And you can move past this. And then the actual message of the show was like, no, blindly follow authority and just follow this cult's rules, and
Yep.
then we will be strong together. So, all right.
Yeah. And then they named Grogu Din Grogu at the
Yes.
end.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of this stuff? Because I had to like look it
Barely.
up to
Barely.
remember it.
A lot of stuff happened, and it just, because there's no emotional stakes or payoff, I just forgot all of it.
Yeah. They were like, there's going to be a mythosaur. And then the mythosaur like didn't really happen.
Yeah.
There was a pirate subplot that apparently is like a backdoor
For
thing to Skeleton Crew or something.
Yeah.
Well, let's just stop talking about that season because it was bad. Number 8, Mando season 3. What's your number 7?
I have Ahsoka as number 7.
Wow. Okay, so we're way off on that.
Yeah, I figured you. Well, so you're a Rebels watcher. I'm not a Rebels watcher.
That is true. I have a very close personal attachment to Star Wars Rebels, so that does explain a lot. So tell me why Ahsoka's your number 7.
Well, I think so. You sent me a decent amount of Rebels episodes to watch, and I watched them and enjoyed them. I think the biggest problem is that the main character of Rebels is not the main character of Ahsoka. Like, Ahsoka's barely in Rebels. Like, Ezra is the guy. It's kind of an ensemble, but like Ezra is the beating heart of the Rebels show, I feel like.
Yep.
And they did not have him in until like the very end of this one.
They did the Disney thing.
Yeah.
Episode 6 or 7. Here's the guy.
Yeah, and I don't think Ahsoka, at least version of Ahsoka, is interesting enough to lead a show. She just kind of sat there and like talked about platitudes the entire first half of the season.
Yeah.
And I felt like it moved very slowly. None of it was very interesting for me. There was one episode, and I think it was episode 4, where I think I texted you and I was like, oh, they finally figured out what they're doing.
Yep.
Like they're going to push this forward. It's like Dave Filoni read my notes about it. And then after that, it just fell apart again.
And then literally the next episode is the World Between Worlds Anakin Skywalker thing that you despised. So
it just like there's no point to it. The only point to it was let's get Hayden back in here because they keep talking about like what her growing message is, but like nobody knows what the message is. It's just like live or die. I choose to live. Okay.
Okay, cool. That's a fun little fever dream, and that's about it.
It was an episode full of just Star Wars porn, basically.
Yeah, and they did the Disney thing again, where the main villain of the show, Grand Admiral Thrawn, doesn't show up until the last 25% of the season.
Is so bad in this show. It's hilarious.
And it's weird because in the books, Thrawn is like he's a G. Like you don't mess with him. He is a strategist. He's a tactician. He's brutal. He's savage. And in Rebels, he was a little bit less of that, but he was still very good, and he fit in very well into that show. And then in this, it was just like, what is he? We don't even know. There's not even enough screen time to find out who he is, and he's supposed to be the main villain of this whole thing. I don't know.
My favorite part about Thrawn in this series is that like every time something goes wrong, he's like, yes, all part of my design. And then it goes wrong again. He's like, oh, this will work to our advantage.
So it's a trope that comes from the books and the show and whatnot, that Thrawn is always 3 steps ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
But that is not actually being 3 steps ahead of everybody. Yes. That's just like covering up your mistakes by saying it's part of the plan. It's not the same character to a degree. The best thing that came out of Thrawn, I think, was the behind the scenes photo of Lars Mikkelsen smoking a cigarette in the full blue paint. That was pretty fun.
And I think he's good, and like I think he could do okay. I think just the script didn't really give him much to work with.
Well, the script didn't give almost anyone anything
it's true.
to work with. I think Ray Stevenson was the only one who really chewed into everything, and of course he went and died. So
it's unfortunate. I think the biggest thing that I can say about this show is that they set up a perfect personal conflict between Ezra and who's the girl, Sabine. In that Ezra sacrifices himself to save the world from Thrawn. And Sabine makes a terrible decision to basically undo all of that. And then she meets Ezra
Mhm.
And my thought was, hey, this is going to be a big like clash between them.
Nope.
And then they mention it one time and never talk about it again. I was like, what?
Yep. And now Ezra's home, and Sabine is still stuck in the other
And
universe, and
everyone's fine, I
that's it.
guess. It was also really weird that like the ending is almost like Empire Strikes Backy, where it's like, oh, the villain wins, everything's terrible, and then Ahsoka is like, actually, everything's great. We're right where we're meant to be.
And
What?
here's Anakin watching over us.
Yeah.
Everything is fine.
Do
We
you
needed
hear
to get
it?
Hayden in
Do you
there
hear
one
it,
more time.
Corey? The waves? No,
No,
the lightsabers.
yeah, it's not it. It's hard for me because I love those characters deeply,
I just felt
and
like they weren't. So I've seen a couple episodes of Rebels, and they seemed so much more interesting in that show than they were in live action. And I
yeah,
don't know where the disconnect is.
it doesn't make sense because Filoni did both.
Yeah.
He was the supervising director of all 4 seasons of Rebels,
Yep.
and he was the only writer for Ahsoka. So
Yeah. I hope with season 2, if they get it, he brings in a writer's room because I
that would
think
be
he
nice.
needs it. I don't think he. And this is not like to trash Filoni in general. Like most shows have writers' rooms. It's very rare for one guy to write an entire
Mhm.
episode of TV
Yeah,
or entire season of TV.
but that's going to be there's 2 sides of Star Wars television. There's the Mandoverse, which is either Favreau writing everything or Filoni writing everything,
Yeah.
and then there's like the Andor acolyte world where they have writers' rooms.
Yeah.
And I think Disney is seeing that having a writers' room, especially for television, is paramount.
Yeah.
If it's a movie, maybe that's one thing,
Yeah.
but for TV, it's kind of a stretch. So,
Yeah.
My number 7 was Boba Fett.
Okay.
Because I just didn't. It never got off the ground for me. There were some high points.
So
Seeing him get out of the Sarlacc pit was neat. The fever dreams that he had with the Tuscans were cool. The little train sequence was fun. But then the hard pivot into one episode all about the Mandalorian, and then one episode all about zombie Luke Skywalker. It didn't really connect anything. And then, of course, this is 3 seasons now that we've talked about where they did the Disney thing, where the big bad villain, who is a nostalgia bait character, which is Cad Bane in this instance, he shows up in the penultimate episode and then dies in the finale.
Yep.
And there's no stakes because
it keeps happening.
we don't know any of this stuff. Like Cad Bane and Boba Fett have a history because there was a deleted episode of Clone Wars, one that never got to air, where they have a duel, and the dent in Boba Fett's helmet, the famous dent in the Mandalorian helmet, comes from Cad Bane, and we don't explore any of that.
Yeah.
They have this legendary gunfight. It's awesome. You can see it if you YouTube it. There's like rough animatics of it.
Yep, I've seen it.
And then just none of that happens. It's the Pikes pulling the strings, and it just kind of happens. So
yeah,
that's it.
The Book of Boba Fett is what you get when you work backwards, where it's like, we need to have a Boba Fett show, go make a Boba Fett show, rather than like somebody coming up with some great idea for what a Boba Fett show should be. Because they tried to do this thing where they kept comparing it like to The Godfather and stuff in the behind the scenes footage, and none of that really played out. Like Boba Fett's supposed to be this crime lord, but he doesn't do anything bad the entire show. He's just kind of like a good solid guy working his way through the crime world. The heavy-handed flashback to Tank scenes are so funny. It's just like every episode we have to do a close-up on him in the back to Tank, and then we do the flashback.
And the flashback has really weird color grading and artificial film grain thrown onto it. And
well, so there's one good episode. The train heist episode is actually good, I think.
It's good. Yeah.
And like when that happened, I was like, oh, maybe they've got something going with this show. And then again, they didn't. It was, there's not a good theme or idea. It's just like in the end of the show, Boba Fett's basically like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. It's like, what is the character development here? I don't quite understand. And then making it a backdoor pilot for Mando season 3 and
So weird.
basically undoing the finale of Mando season 2 in a
Right.
completely different show
Hmm.
is pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened in production on this. The only thing I can think of is that maybe they were filming Mando season 3 and then COVID hit or something, and so they had to like spin it into something else and combine the shows,
Yeah.
something like that.
My thought was that they do the breakup at the end of season 2 of Mando, and the original plan was to stretch that out a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But then the corporate folks at the top were
Yeah,
probably like, we need the little green guy back.
yeah,
You
it
need to
makes
get
us too
him
much
back with
money.
his dude because there's too much money to be made
Yeah,
on them together instead of apart. So that's, if I had to guess, that's what happened. But
yeah, that sounds about right,
either way, shoehorning it into an entirely different show
man.
makes no sense whatsoever.
And,
I
and
I, I thought the Bryce Dallas Howard one, which was the Mando one where he rebuilds the
yeah,
N1 starfighter, that would have been perfect as like a Disney Plus original movie.
yeah,
Like give it 20 more minutes or something, and don't have it be part of the Book of Boba
agree.
Fett. And I think it would have done gangbusters,
Yep.
but I don't know. Just
Yeah,
weird.
it has those similar pacing issues to another show we'll talk about later, where they kind of stop the narrative and then you have to put everything together in the finale really
Yeah.
quickly because you only give yourself one episode.
Yep.
It's very oddly paced. It's weird because I think the two Mando episodes, or I guess the Mando and Luke Skywalker episode, are actually fairly solid episodes by
Mhm.
themselves, but they're
Yeah.
just in the wrong show,
Completely.
and they completely sideline the Boba Fett story. And I don't think the Boba Fett story was really interesting to begin with. I feel kind of bad for Tamara Morrison because he
Yeah.
finally gets to come back as as Boba Fett because he played Jango Fett, of course, and there's just nothing for him to work with.
Although, like a bantha,
Like a banta.
you get that. So that's exciting. Uh, okay, what's your number six?
Oh, that was Book of Boba Fett was number 6 for me.
Oh, okay, great.
Yep.
My number six is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yep, that's my number 5. So we're only off by like one.
Yeah,
You slotted Ahsoka in somewhere higher, and that just shifted everything down
pretty
into
much. I think
yeah
so, probably.
into the same.
But yeah, Obi-Wan has a lot of the same issues I have with the other shows we talked about already, where it's there is some substance there, but it's stretched out because it was clearly a movie script or
Yeah,
plot that they extended into a television show. I love getting Ewan back. I think Ewan's fantastic. I thought the girl that played Little Leia was very good.
yeah,
Um, Joel Edgerton back as Uncle Owen, great. Uh, you know, Hayden back, Vader back, all cool stuff. But that's about where it starts and stops
yeah,
for me. The rest is kind of clunky and production values. I know that this one was like the one that was dead in the middle of COVID.
yeah,
So I don't know if there's any excuses to be made in regards to that. But when you look at this one compared to almost every other show that they've made, the production value is significantly lower,
yeah.
which you wouldn't think that would be the case because this is the big one where you're bringing back a legacy character. It just seems backwards to me, but yeah.
Yeah. They brought in the cinematographer for I forget which movie it was, but I think it's a Korean movie.
Old boy.
Is it Old Boy?
Yeah, yeah.
He did? Okay.
Yep.
And he clearly didn't know how to use the volume. And so what you get is a lot of weird like camera moves and shaky camera that's just really off-putting and distracting.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest indictment, though, for this script is that the best 2 episodes are the beginning and the end, which were
Mhm.
very obvious points that, like, I could have written, kind of thing. Like, everyone in their head had this idea of, like, okay, Obi-Wan's going to be, like, PTSD after this Anakin thing. And then in
Mhm.
the end, it's like, yeah, well, he's got to watch over Luke and he'll probably say hello there. And both of those things happened, but then anything
Yep.
else that was new that like required actual thought to figure out what to make the story about fell apart, right? The whole middle section where it's like, well, Leia gets kidnapped, then they get Leia back, and then Leia gets kidnapped again, and then they have to get Leia back again. The Grand Inquisitor where he just gets stabbed and then he's fine, and then Riva gets stabbed and then she's fine, All
a
of it
couple
is
times.
just
She
a
gets stabbed as a
mess.
kid and as an adult, and
Yeah,
then she's fine.
right. And then I think like a month or two ago, I saw this tweet that was like, you know, uh, just remembering that like woman that helps out Obi-Wan. It's like, remember how, she saved Obi-Wan. And then there was a quote tweet that was like, I don't remember this at all. It's just such a just a forgettable middle
Yeah.
section of that season. The only thing that saves it for me is that duel between Obi-Wan and Vader is good.
Yeah.
In
Very good.
the ending, where you've got Hayden like talking through the voice, like his voice keeps changing between the
Hmm.
Vader and
Yep.
Anakin voice.
Which is a thing
Uh,
they did in Rebels. So it's not 100% original, but
right,
it
right.
still worked very
It's
well.
almost exactly identical.
Yeah.
And
Um,
then where Obi-Wan's talking to Leia in the very end
yeah.
and talking about her parents, like
Mhm.
that kind of hit for me, and
Yep.
it needed a little bit more of that emotional connection because the
Yeah.
middle was just a big mess.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. The beginning and the end had that emotion,
Yeah,
and it resonated, and it connected to stuff. Showing the Fortress Inquisitorius after it was already in the Jedi Fallen Order video game, it looked awful
yeah,
compared to the renders in the video game. It's just
yep,
like, guys, just don't do it. If you can't make it look as good, just don't do that, right?
yeah,
The first duel between Vader and Obi-Wan before Obi-Wan gets his mojo back is not good.
no.
It's like a weird game of cat and mouse, and they're just
And then
like,
he gets his mojo back in like 5 minutes.
yeah. But he does that cool little flick with his lightsaber, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh, there's
he's
the
got it.
Obi-Wan we know. He did the leg kick and everything, so he's back. But I mean, it was good in the sense where it was like, I I remember these characters fondly, and I like seeing them again. I like
Yeah,
seeing Bail Organa. It was
yeah,
cool seeing Alderaan not blown to smithereens. Like
yeah.
that kind of stuff was neat. Again, though, it probably should have been a movie. They probably just should have kept it that way, and it would have been okay. But they got scared after Solo bombed and
Yeah.
everything pivoted to television. So that was my number 6, and it was your number 5,
Yeah.
right? Okay. My number 5 was Mando season 2
Got it. I have the Acolyte at 4.
at 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, take your pick, whichever one you want to talk about
I
first.
mean, we've talked about the Acolyte a lot on
Yeah.
this show, so I won't spend too much time on it. Only that it's not nearly as bad as the haters say, but it's not very good anyways. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas, and they try to do something different with it, but I think the execution is just very sloppily done.
Fair point.
I think it looks better than your Obi-Wan, your volume shows
Mhm.
just in general, but I
Oh, yeah.
don't think it looks particularly good. And the acting just didn't really do it for me. Aside from Lee Jung-jae, who was awesome, like
Yeah.
he's the best part of the show for sure.
And Manny Jacinto.
And Manny Jacinto, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, yes, I can't forget him because he was good. He played a
Yeah.
good villain.
Anytime the two of them were on screen together, my eyes were like glued to it.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
other times I kind of just started
Yeah,
fading
but it
out
has
of
that
it.
same issue that we talked about where it pauses the narrative right before the finale, and then they gotta throw everything together in the final episode.
Yep.
Well, I think the final episode is probably the best one of the show. It was just like it needed a lot more episodes like that for it
Mhm.
really to hit.
Yeah. To me, it had 2 very good episodes,
Mm-hmm.
being the fifth one, which is the bloodbath,
Yeah.
and then the finale.
Yeah.
And then it had 6 episodes that were either just okay or not good.
Yeah.
And the not good ones being the 2 flashback episodes, which
Yep.
kind of ruined the momentum. So I had that as my number 4
Got it.
also. But I had Mando 2 at number 5,
Got it.
which I assumed that you would have lower on your list given
Yeah.
how much you dislike the ending of it.
Well,
So
I
I'm curious
dislike-
to see what
Yes.
you had it at number
I had it 3.
at 3. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I have to like put this in context though, because it being 3 does not mean that I liked it.
Sure.
If that makes sense. I think really there's one good and one passable season of television of Star Wars, and the rest is kind of below average. But this is just like the least below average of them for me.
Okay.
I think the ending with Luke Skywalker is very stupid, uh, because of how it kind of betrays the storytelling. However, I think the rest of that finale is actually really good.
Yeah, no, I
I
agree.
think all of the emotional payoff there is good, and obviously the connection between Grogu and Mando, where he finally takes off the helmet, is like a big
Mhm.
moment, right?
Yep.
Which is why it's dumb when they undo all of that in like the other show a year
Yeah,
later, because that was such a big moment.
sure was. Yep.
But Mando season two though it felt like it didn't know what it wanted to do in this season, aside from we have to get Grogu to a Jedi. And so it just kind of inserted villain of the week kind of thing, which
Mhm.
the first one did a little bit too.
Yeah,
But it just inserted a bunch, and then it's like, well, now what if we had Boba Fett? And now what if we had Ahsoka? And now what if
and
we had Luke
Bo-Katan.
Skywalker? It became the Star Wars crossover show
Uh-huh.
instead of
Yep.
like an actual story.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about season one, but I think the character development and growth between Grogu and Mando stalls completely in this season until the very end because they can't talk to each other.
Mm,
One of them doesn't have a face, and the other one can't talk. So
yeah.
it's just them emoting at each other for an entire season. And for me, that it doesn't really the structure of like buddy cop, like villain of the week, doesn't really work
It's
with
not
two
even like a buddy
characters
cop
that
thing because Grogu's not like a
yeah,
peer to
right.
Mando,
But
right?
that's kind of like it's structured similar to like The Last of Us or something like that,
Sure,
where
yeah, the
it's
lone wolf and cub
the lone wolf
idea,
and
right?
cub
Yeah.
structure, but that doesn't really work if those two characters are not building a bond on screen as we go.
Mhm.
They kind of build the bond in season one, and then that kind of flatlines until maybe the very end of season two, where he lets him go with Luke Skywalker. I think there were some cool episodes in there. I think the finale is good, aside from I am a notorious hater of that Luke Skywalker bit, just because it felt totally out of the blue and discounts the storytelling. Like the whole reason people love the show is that it was different, not that it was the Star Wars show, and then they just make it Luke Skywalker saves
Mhm.
the day again. So yeah, I don't think it's great, but it's my number three, mainly because everything else below it is also not great.
Fair. I like the premiere. 'Cause John Favreau is a good director.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
he's
he's
a
a good
bad
writer,
director.
but he's a good director.
And the Cobb Vanth stuff, Timothy Oliphant, very good. That Western feel as Mando's coming down the main drag of the little town, Freetown or whatever they call it. Crate Dragon thing was cool. But then, the whole season kind of devolves into backdoor pilots for other things.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because the Ahsoka episode is my favorite episode of that season. But that's because it introduced a character that I cared very deeply about.
Yeah.
Like my cat is named Ahsoka,
Right.
and has been before this ever happened, right? So like seeing that come to life was very cool. There's some good, there's some bad, but that's kind of the theme of these Star Wars shows on Disney Plus so far. So we talked about Mando 2, talked about Ahsoka, talked about the Acolyte.
So you had Ahsoka as 3?
I did, yeah. Even though, like you, I don't think it's a great show,
Right.
but it has an emotional resonance for me because
Right.
there's a lot of characters that I care about, and
Yeah.
just it's almost like wish fulfillment. Just seeing
Yeah.
them in
Yeah.
live action is almost enough for me to just be like, okay, I want to go watch that show again.
Yeah, I feel like that's the problem with Star Wars is they focus
Sure.
too much
Yeah.
on that and not enough about making it an actual good story and stuff. They think that if you just show something on screen that they recognize, that the
Right.
fans recognize, that's enough. That's all you need to do.
But the next two on the list, our top two, are proof positive that you need to do more, and
Yeah.
that's how you get into that upper echelon of the quality spectrum. So I'm guessing your number two is Mando 1.
Yes.
Okay, mine as well. Greg Fraser, the GOAT, coming in and making a television show look like a movie fresh
Yep.
off of his work on Rogue One. And then he went off and did Batman and Dune 2 and hasn't touched Star Wars since. But I feel like they caught fire with that first season
It
of The
was a really
Mandalorian.
good initial idea, which
Yeah.
is this Mandalorian bounty hunter who ends up with a soft spot for the target. And I
Yes.
think that's a really good premise and idea. And I think that it works for about 4 episodes. And then it does not continue to work. Because once you get to that point where he changes and he's holding the little ball that
Which is episode
Grogu
3.
would play with. Is it 3? Okay, well,
That's
there you
3.
go. Three
Yep.
episodes. Where he's holding the little ball and he's like, "Oh shit, I got to go save this. Like I've made a mistake. I need to go save this little kid." That all works for me.
Mhm.
Where it falls apart for me after that is like I don't feel like they knew what to do after that.
Sure.
Once you got your objective, which I think should have been the end of the season, maybe something like that. Structure it a little bit differently, where he makes that decision towards the end rather than towards the beginning.
Like some of the side missions that he goes on, like in episode 4, when they go and they do the Seven Samurai thing where they teach the village how to fight, and then when he does the prison break thing in the 6th episode, you could have done those after the first episode. And or after he drops off Grogu to the client, right?
Yeah,
he goes off
I
and does some more bounties.
Been better if like he's making his way back to drop off Grogu, and like all along the way he's doing all these things in the meantime, right? And then he finally drops him off, and then like decides differently, and
right,
you know, we go from there. And you also could have maybe combined that with the Moff Gideon introduction. In that moment, then it would have been a big finale.
Did the thing again.
Yeah, they introduced
Moff Gideon shows up in episode 7.
Yep.
All the way at the very end of the episode is the main villain of the season.
Yeah.
He loses very quickly. You think he's dead, and then he uses the Darksaber to get himself out of his TIE fighter, which is cool. And everyone's like, oh shit, it's a Darksaber. That's like deep cut lore reference. Like all that fun stuff was there. But again, like you said, the first 3 episodes of that show they hit, and they hit really well. And that initial reveal in the end of the first episode, where you see little Grogu in the pram and no one knows what his name is, everyone's like, oh my god, it's a Yoda species. All the memes that came out from all the cute shit that he did in this season, like it took off, and it went straight into the pop culture lexicon, right? It was immediately a thing, which I think is cool. It's funny because it's the least expensive season of The Mandalorian by a long shot,
and the best,
and it looks like the best.
Yes,
the production value, even with like lesser volume tech than what they have now, it looks better, and a lot of that I attribute to Fraser, because he used it on Batman. He understands the technology very well, and he can do stuff that makes it look very convincing. He also, I think he was quoted saying, the volume doesn't work well for anything that's in the middle of the day. If you're looking for middle of the day sun, you can't replicate it with the volume. Gotcha. The volume is great for sunrise, it's great for sunset, it's good for blue hour, all that kind of stuff. But if you're trying to get stuff where you're in broad daylight, the volume is not your friend.
Which is funny because like all the other shows that use the volume now are doing a lot of broad daylight, like Guardians of the Galaxy, or not? Yeah, it was Guardians of the. No, it was Thor 2.
Thor
2, or Thor 3, 4.
There's
4 of them.
There's 4 of them.
Thor 4. What are Ragnarok, right?
Love and Thunder.
Jesus.
You're a bad Marvel fan. We're going to review Deadpool next week. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, sorry. Love and Thunder. Did they use volume on Ragnarok too, or just Love and Thunder? Okay.
Just Love and Thunder.
Yeah, so Love and Thunder, like the beginning with Guardians of the Galaxy, that looks terrible because they're all in a little circle and it's totally volume.
Yep.
In the middle of the day. Yeah, so that looks bad.
That's the other thing, is that Mando 1, all those volume sets, there's like 2 to 3 bodies on set.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be big spectacle. It's meant to be small and intimate, and it works really well there. It's when they try to start blowing it up and making it huge that I think it starts to suffer a smidge.
Yeah.
But I adore that season. I really like it. So
I'm moderately positive on it. I remember like when it came out, I was not big on it. I'm still not big on it, but I think it's passable, and I think it tried to do something different, which I enjoy.
Mhm.
And I think that's what people, like I said, that's what people really dug about it was
Yeah, for
this is a
sure.
different thing that we've seen before in Star Wars, and it just betrays all of that by going seasons 2 and 3 into like just the most lore heavy show you could possibly imagine. And it's unfortunate because I think they were really cooking with some ideas, and then
Mhm.
it's one of those things that like it became too big for what it was supposed to be.
Yep.
Like it became too popular, and then they're like, oh, we got to do bigger. We gotta make this our Avengers, and it's like it's not. It was never meant to be that.
But it will be because
Yeah,
they're making a movie,
yeah.
so it's going to
Not
be
everything has
interesting.
to be the Avengers. Not everything has to be a crossover event.
Eh,
Just make a solid little story, and
tell Bob Iger that.
I know.
When there's dollars to be made, the
Yep,
crossovers will happen, and
yep.
that's the end of that. So, if you couldn't tell already, the background has been staring you in the face for this entire episode with the Eye of Aldani. Number one is obviously Andor. I don't know what more I can say about this show and how many superlatives I could throw at it. It is the one that feels the least like Star Wars.
Mhm.
Yes, that is true. It also has the best writing, the best acting, the best cinematography, the best production value, probably the best music. I mean, it's just, it hits in every single way that
Yep,
all of these other shows don't. So,
yep. This is the only good Star Wars show. But it's the only one to me that I can actually recommend to people and say this is a good show. The rest of them I can say are, if you like Star Wars, you'll enjoy them.
they're
Maybe
fun.
Mando season 1, especially because like the cute Yoda stuff or Grogu stuff. But Andor is the one that actually functions as a television show. It
Yep.
has character development, it has build up, it has stakes, it has payoff, it has great acting, great writing. I mean, have we gotten anything better in Star Wars since Disney took over than One Way Out and Rick's Road?
No.
Probably not. Just in general, I would put that above anything else Disney Star Wars, period. Rogue One, Last Jedi, Force Awakens, all of it.
Hmm. Easily.
And yeah, and I think it's all testament to the writing. The beginning of the show, I will say, it does start a little slowly,
Hmm.
like because it takes its time to build up, but like if it does take like 2 full episodes of setup before anything of substance really happens.
But they
And I
knew
think
that because they released 3 episodes
yes,
all on the
yes,
same day, right?
yes.
So
And I almost think this would have worked better if you just made it almost like Sherlock, where the episodes are actually an hour and a half and
sure,
you just
yeah,
cut them all together rather than making it 3 episodes. Because I think if somebody watches like episode 1 of this, it doesn't necessarily end on like that big episode 1 cliffhanger, but episode 3 does.
hmm,
And it's weird. Like you should have just released that as one episode is the beginning with, up until the point where Andor goes with Stellan
Stellan Skarsgård,
Skarsgård.
yeah,
I forget his name in the show, but like that is your pivot moment, right? And then you
hmm,
have the Aldani episode, and
yeah,
then maybe like a short little intermission episode, and then you have like the prison break episode and the Rick's Road finale
hmm,
episode. I think that works a whole lot better
yeah.
than the way that they released it.
It's clearly structured almost like miniature movies
Yes.
to a degree, right? And I'm very curious to see when season 2 comes out next year if they're going to actually release them that way,
Mm-hmm.
because the next season is going to be very different than this one, because this one was 12 episodes that takes place over about a year's worth of time. The next season is going to be 12 episodes, but each 3 are going to have a year's time jump in
Mm-hmm.
between, and it's the fourth, third, second, and first years leading up to Rogue One, where apparently the show is, Tony Gilroy's already said the show ends on the Ring of Kafrine,
Yep.
where you first meet Cassian in Rogue One.
Yep.
So I'll be curious to see if they do like 3 episodes per week and they just do it for like 4 weeks, or if they know, hey, we've got a really good show here, we can stretch out subscriber numbers for 3 months or whatever
Right.
by doing weekly drops or whatever. But yeah, I mean, either way, it's the one thing that Disney has made that I have full confidence in.
Agree.
Like
Yeah.
I can go back and watch that show, the first season. It still hits everything. The Aldani arc is still fantastic. All the bit players that come in and do small little bits, all the stuff in One Way Out, the two monologues from Andy Serkis and Stellan Skarsgård, they're Emmy worthy. The bit from Marva at the end of Rick's Road with the hologram, that's as good as any call to action speech in anything, and not even just in Star Wars, right? And I think it's the only one that has really garnered like awards acclaim and critical acclaim and all that other stuff. Like the other shows all get nominated for hair and makeup and special effects and all that stuff, but it's Star Wars. You expect that from those. This one, it's light on the aliens. It's light on the special effects. There are no lightsabers, whatever. But all of the other stuff, like the Nemec character in the Aldani arc, that is a person who is desperate to see change happen in his world, right? And when you hear the voiceover of his manifesto, it is so good. Like it's chill inducing, right? And I don't get that from a lot of other Star Wars. I love all Star Wars and I watch it far more than I should, but none of it has that weight and heaviness behind it that this does.
There's a lot of substance, of substance in this, and less flash, which I think that's really, and a lot of people will complain and say that, this doesn't feel like Star Wars. It's not an action adventure. And to me, that it doesn't really matter. I am very grateful that Tony Gilroy came in and said, you know what, I'm just going to make this story, and it's kind of like a political thriller, and I'm going to put it in this universe, because I think that Star Wars needs to do more of that. It doesn't need to be, not everything needs to be striving to be what the original trilogy or prequel trilogy did. It doesn't need to be the exact same feel. I get why they do it, because it feels like every show is trying to recreate Star Wars rather than trying to make its own show. Right? Like Tony Gilroy is a fan of political drama, and like he's done a lot of stuff like that with Bourne and all that stuff.
Bourne, all that.
And so he says, well, I'm going to use this sandbox to tell a similar kind of story. And he did a lot of research around revolutions and around the world and how all of that went, and how he could tie that in with the rebellion. I don't think any other show has really done that. Every other show is like, hey guys, remember how great you love Star Wars? Like that's it. That's all we get. What does the Obi-Wan show really get us? Other than, hey, it's Ewan
McGregor and Hayden Christensen.
It's Hayden Christensen again. And Ahsoka, kind of the same thing. It's here's Hayden Christensen as Anakin. And here's Boba Fett and all that stuff. And this is why I say, like, feels like it's top down, where it's like, hey, we need to have Obi-Wan show, we need to have Boba Fett show. And Andor, I think it was actually supposed to be like a Cassian and K2SO buddy cop
show. It was going to be a buddy cop thing, and Tony Gilroy called Kathy Kennedy and said that is a horrible idea. I'm in. Let me change it. And that's how we got what we got. So,
it's a little miracle that we got this made, because I think the viewership numbers were probably the worst of all of them. But probably. I do think like we're looking at that a little bit wrong, because I think season 2 will actually have really good viewership numbers, because enough people have talked about how good this show is. And I've talked to numerous people that like have seen this show so much later than when it aired. And they're like, wow, I never even knew that this came out and how good it was. So I think that a lot of people will pick it up over time. And then going into season 2, there will be a built-in audience for it.
I think a lot of people also probably didn't give it much of a shot after the first 3. And which is a shame, because as soon as you get past the first 3 episodes, that's when the heist arc happens.
And it only gets better.
It takes the hell off when it gets to the heist arc, which is kind of a drag. But I hope you're right. I hope season 2, and especially because it is going to get closer to Rogue One. It is inevitable that it will introduce more characters that people are already familiar with. But I think it will be done by a group of people who are very good at what they do. And I'm hoping that it'll be like, hey guys, see, it doesn't have to be Zeb Orrelios sitting at a bar in a Rebel pilot outfit for everyone to go, oh my God, it's Zeb from Rebels.
Yep.
Oh, it's happening. You know, like if you build in like the way that they built Saw Gerrera into
Yeah.
Andor,
Yeah.
fantastic, right?
It's Saw
The way that
Gerrera, but,
Mon
like, he's
Mothma is built
yeah.
into Andor, fantastic. Like
Yep.
having a full writer's room that really knows what they're doing. I think that'll make all the difference in the world. And God, I can't wait to see it. Is it?
Yeah,
It looks like
I'm
$1
super
million
excited.
bucks.
Yeah.
I've watched the
leaked
at Star Wars
trailer or whatever.
Celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah, they put out a trailer and like someone filmed it with their phone, and it's like the whole bottom quarter of the frame is obscured by someone's like the back of their head.
Yeah.
I've watched it like 12 times because it looks so good, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before, but Andor is, I think, the only show that like you could put on HBO and it would be fine.
Yeah.
Like it would work. It's
Yep.
the only Star Wars, really the only Disney Plus show, I think, that you could do that in Star Wars, Marvel, or anything that they've done. I like Loki a lot, but I still think it's a notch below what Andor is doing.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. So, yep, it's a winner, and that's why it's number one at the top of our list. So to recap, it's basically Andor and then everything else.
Yeah.
All the way down to Mando 3, which I actually, when we were putting this list together, forgot that it existed. And I sent Shane a list and I said, this is it, right? And he said, you forgot Mando 3. And I was like, as did the rest of the world. So, so that's going to wrap things up for this video. If you liked it, we would love for you guys to tap that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave us a comment and let us know your ranking of each of these Star Wars seasons. We'd love to engage in some conversation with you, see which ones worked for you, and see if the lists are similar to the ones that these two idiots on the screen put together. So we'll be back in a few days with our Deadpool and Wolverine review, which I'm sure is going to be a hoot because Shane hates cameos and hates nostalgia bait. And I'm pretty sure that movie is going to be nothing but that. So if you're looking forward to Cranky Shane coming out, definitely keep your eyes and ears peeled for that one. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video.